our fourth episode, a week after a long hiatus. For those of you joining us for the first time, both of us are season ticket holders that sit in the 300 level section at Gillette Stadium. And we enjoy talking Patriots and breaking down each game and transaction. So we figured we'd start a podcast and see where that takes us. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 level pod for up to the minute updates and commentary on news of the day. So to start, we're going to talk, obviously, recap probably the biggest regular season game or one of the biggest regular season games in NFL history with the Patriots versus Bucs from last week. So Kevin, just wanted to start off. You were at the game on Sunday night. How was the stadium atmosphere? How was Brady received? What was that environment like?
Yeah, I think the whole atmosphere was exactly like a playoff game. It was loud. Everyone was into the game. It was an awesome atmosphere. Everyone was into it. I would say this is probably the most fans I've actually seen in the stadium before the game. So when I was walking to the seats, it was packed in the concourse section just to get to your seats, and that never happens. And that was probably about 20 to 30 minutes before the game. It's because I wanted to make sure I got into the seats right before the video happened. So we got there probably a half hour before, and it was packed. So that was something that was really cool to see. Everyone wanted to see how Brady was received and everything like that. And I think it was a good crowd reaction to him. So when Brady came on the field and the video happened, he was cheered mostly. There were some boos. And then once the first drive happened, when Brady was going onto the field, everyone was booing him just so that way he knew. At first he was welcomed in, but once the game started, you're now on the opposing side. We're not going to be cheering you on. So I think that was actually really cool how everyone, I was kind of on the same page. It wasn't I was worried there would be a mix of people that would still be in their Brady love where they may not actually root for the Patriots, and they may root for Brady during the game. And that didn't really seem like it was happening. So I think it was a good mix between the two. So that way, when he was first welcomed, he was welcomed. And then when he was on the field, he was treated like an opponent. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Granted, I was watching it on TV, so it wasn't able to feel the same atmosphere as you. But I thought it was really cool that when he came out originally, everyone was cheering. But I also appreciated how when he came out with the Bucs at the end, how everyone was booing him since he's an opponent. So he was able to get the reaction of all fans being appreciative of everything he's done for us the last 20 years, but now also realizing he's on another team. So we're rooting for the Patriots first and foremost. We're rooting for Mac Jones.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another question just had was based on how the TV aspect was it. Did the yardage, were they able to really show that? Because I know that was kind of glanced over during the game just because it seemed like Brady didn't want any sort of recognition for that. We heard that after the game that Brady and the Bucs and the Patriots actually all didn't want any sort of big fanfare over it just because Brady asked for that. So did they mention it more on the TV, or was it something that was also glanced over?
It was also, I guess, sort of a unique moment because initially the official score or whatever, when he initially said how many yards it was, it said it was I believe he either initially was 1 yard short or actually tied the record. So then the announcers were trying to say he tied it, but next throw he'll have to wait to pass it. And then maybe like 20 seconds later, right before the snap, they were saying how he anticlimactically, actually, they changed the official scoring. So it's 1 yard ahead. So he actually broke the record. So they kept talking about it the whole time on TV, but it was a little anticlimactic because at first it was considered either yard short, then tied, then that he broke the record.
Yeah. Makes sense. So going actually into the game, what do you think of the Patriots game plan? How do you think they did trying to plan for Brady, how to plan against this Bucs defense?
I thought the game plan was excellent, both on offense and defensive side. Offensive side, or I'll start with defensive side because that was probably both of us. I'd say our biggest concern going into the game was: is this defense going to be able to stop Tom Brady and all the Bucs weapons at wide receiver? The Patriots had a little bit of an easier target or option since Gronk wasn't in, considering Gronk is a big red zone target. But I feel like going into it, the quarterbacks we faced so far were Tua, which we're both not big fans of. Jameis Winston, who I know you're not big on. I think he's good, but he also hasn't thrown. I don't think he's just eclipsed 150 yards this year. and then Zach Wilson, who is a rookie, and he might be good, but at least so he was terrible when we play the Patriots. So we weren't sure how the secondary was going to be against Tom Brady, and I think game plan was excellent. They said it a lot on the broadcast where you could see it just watching it that it didn't look like Tom Brady got the same look 2 plays in a row. Like you think sometimes it might be a different look drive to drive, but it was like play to play where it was playing mind games with Brady a little bit, trying to see get him off his game early on. And I also wasn't sure how the Patriots defensive backs were going to be able to execute against wide receivers just since the Bucs are so talented, and Patriots were without Gilmore, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I thought everyone played great. I mean, it helped them out that Tom airmailed some throws, and then the Bucs wide receivers had some drops in key situations. But overall, I thought they played excellent. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I'll just get into a little bit. I thought that was one of the best offensive game plans I've seen Josh have in a long time, both play wise and also consistently. Sometimes he might have a couple drives where he might start off hot and then just have questionable decisions as the game goes on. I thought there were some points here and there, but I thought overall throughout the course of the game, that was one of the best offensive play calling games that Josh has had in a while too.
Yeah. I think I agree. Most on the defense, the offense, we can disagree a little bit with, but defense was they mixed and matched a ton. He wasn't sending the same rusher every time. They got a lot of pressure with just four people rushing. It looked like they were rushing 5. They dropped one back. So who was getting dropped back was different each time. So I think that was really helpful. And this is kind of the same game plan that Rex Ryan would used to do against Brady. You only rush 4, you drop everyone back into coverage and try and force Brady to either run, which ended up happening in the second half, which is where they got more of the yards and got some more of their scoring opportunities from. But the Patriots would have rather that happen where they have the running back try and beat them versus Brady. So it's better to have an average of 4 yards per game from running back than it is 7 to 10 yards per game for Brady throwing. So I really like the game plan with that. I'm actually pleasantly surprised they were able to execute it for the most part, which this early in the season is usually something that doesn't happen with like a Belichick defense. It does take time for them to all get meshed together. So the fact that they were able to get kind of on the same page for most of the part, I think was really good there. For the offensive part, I think the game plan in the second half was very good, except the end. But I think with the beginning half, it didn't really seem like he was kind of meshing as well as the play calling got in the second half. And I think another aspect too is I know you have to try and run the ball, but it was obvious from the first 3 to 4 plays it wasn't going to happen. And I don't even know why I even bothered running it at all. And then I don't understand, and I know we talked about this before, the toss plays that they're doing the running backs. They never get yardage on it. They're lucky if they get maybe one play a game out of it. And I understand that you don't want to go up against the middle of this Bucs defense because their tackles and in between the tackles is a really strong position for them. But their linebackers are incredibly fast, and they're going to be able to get to the outside and stop the running back there. It's just not something that I think was a win-win. You're more likely to lose yards on them than gain yards. So that wasn't something I was happy with. But
I'd say the one point against usually I agree. I'm not a big fan of toss plays, especially since if you're not handing the ball off, you're tossing it. There's more likelihood of a negative play or a turnover. Yeah, just something I'm not really a big fan of. So I'm usually not, and it usually seems that they don't get as much yards as you would get running up the middle. This game, though, I understand why they did it, just because of how good the front seven is of the Bucs. You're hoping that instead of having your offensive line, which has struggled all year, try and beat the Bucs' strongest part of their defense, you're hoping that your tight ends and your wide receivers would be able to hit their blocks and block against cornerbacks and linebackers that are going up on the outside edge. So that's what I think they were hoping, was that Patriots wide receivers and tight ends would be able to make the blocks and beat their opponent, which they just weren't able to do. So I think that's why they did it on some of the plays. Yeah. And it's just, I think we'll get into this maybe a little bit later on or another podcast, but the blocking right now, not only from the offensive line, but even their 2 tight ends
And then N'Keal Harry coming back. He's what, 6'3", 6'4", 240, 250 pounds, and he can't block a safety. His whole reason for being here is to be a big bodied wide receiver, and his blocking was atrocious in this game. He got knocked back the first play of the game that he was in. So I think that's something that needs to improve. Jonnu Smith was supposed to be a good blocker, and I haven't really seen anything out of that, but he's looked lost the last few times. He got a little bit better this game. But I'm hoping that improves over time. It could just be the complexity of the offense. He's thinking too much. So I'm hoping that's just the case, but that has to definitely be shored up because their tight ends and wide receivers are not blocking as well as they need to be right now.
Yeah, and then it also hurts just because for the last 10 years or so, we're used to seeing Gronk block, which was probably the most underrated aspect of his whole game, where not only is he the best offensive, arguably you could put him and Tony Gonzalez. I'd still take Gronk when healthy as the most productive offensive tight end in football, but his blocking is just on another level where he's probably one of the best blocking tight ends in football. And he has been his whole career.
Yeah.
One point I actually wanted to go over a little bit, just going back to the Patriots defensive game plan a little bit. It reminded me of, or I can't say it reminded me of watching it because I didn't watch the Giants-Bills Super Bowl from the early 90s when Bill was defensive coordinator. But reading about it in a football, or in the essential biography of Bill Belichick, one thing that he wanted to do was he said this to his defense leading up to the game. He wanted the Bills running back to run for over 100 yards. And then some of the linebackers are, Bill, what the hell are you talking about? We don't want to give up 100 yards. And the reason why he wanted to give up a lot of running yards was the Bills offense was better, more explosive than the Giants offense. So if you're running the ball, you're cutting down clock and you're taking away the amount of points that the opponent can score, and it makes it a closer game. Also, by running the ball and having them run a little bit, it just gives the offense some time to, on the sideline, just get used to what they start to like game plan a little bit more and dissect things and get used to it. So it seemed a little bit like that, where they preferred the Bucs to run, which, as you said, is because the Bucs wide receivers are obviously a little better, so you want them running instead of passing. But I think that might have been a little bit towards the game plan as well.
Yeah. No, great. I think that definitely plays a part into it. So now I think the biggest talking point coming out of this game, other than the Brady aspect, it was what do you think about the decision for them to go for the field goal at the end of the game?
That is a great question that everyone has been debating the last 4 days or so.
Yeah.
When it was 3rd down and 3, I was like, obviously, if they don't get it, they have to go for it. They're at the 38-yard line. That would be a 55, 56-yard kick. It was around the 38-yard line, whatever exactly it was. And then the ball on that 3rd down and 3, who was it? Jacoby Myers, wide open. If he caught it, would have gone for probably at least 10 yards, but it gets batted down. Then they bring out the kicker. I was like, this has to be just like a fake to catch the Bucs off guard, and then you bring the offense back in. But then when they didn't, I was like, I don't agree with this at all. Granted, I wasn't in the stadium, so I couldn't see how hard it was raining, but it looked like it was raining probably the hardest it was all night, or up there at least.
Yeah.
And his career long is 55, and I believe his career long with the Patriots is 51, 52.
51.
But you could argue that he's been the Patriots' best player the last year and a half, or most consistent at least. He had the record, 4th longest record of consecutive field goals with 36 leading up to that kick. And I didn't agree with it right after the game. I didn't agree with it, but because I thought he's not really as accurate long distance. And in those weathers, I didn't think it was fair to put him on that stage. And the way Mac was going, it just seemed like he was in a groove. He was in a rhythm. So I was a little upset about it at the time afterwards, but taking time to think about it a little more, I understand why Bill did it. It gives you an opportunity to give one of the players you trust most on the team, an opportunity to give you the lead. And I know you're going up against Brady, who he only has to go 40 yards in like 50 seconds with one timeout, which is something Brady has done his entire career. But I think he was also trusting his defense to be able to hold them, considering how well they were playing. So I don't agree with it, but I understand.
Yeah, I still am very down on the decision. for it, especially even at the time. It was raining. You're right. It was raining the hardest it was at all that day. At that time, it was literally once the Bucs had their field goal and they were kicking off. I was like, oh my god, this of course now that's gonna be starting to rain.
I believe you texted
this
that to
hard.
the group at the
Yeah.
same time.
Oh yeah. So I it was the worst of timing. But the fact that number one, if they almost converted the other play if it wasn't batted down. So one of the things that Bill mentioned was that they only converted, I think, 3 third downs the whole game.
I think they were 2 for 9 with, and then they also had I think there was a third down where they got a first down based on a penalty.
Yeah. So he said they only converted 3 third downs the entire game. That was one of his reasons for not going for the field goal. But he's not really giving the whole clarity that the majority of those other third downs that they didn't convert were 3rd and 15s, 3rd and 17s, 3rd and longs. They weren't 3rd and short. And 3rd and short was actually something the Patriots have converted a lot of this year. So that was one thing that I don't think really kind of makes the mark for what he was saying. And then 2 is, even if you do make the field goal, odds are you're probably going to lose anyway, because Brady, he actually had 2 timeouts. So he had 2 timeouts, 52 seconds or 55 seconds to come down 40 yards and get the field goal. And the Patriots had not stopped them for the 3 previous drives before then. They had scored. So the fact that they had not stopped them before, and the fact that even if you do make this, you're still probably going to lose anyway, it only makes sense to go for it. That way, if you do get it, you're definitely winning the game. And then you're having no shot for Brady getting the ball back. Or if he does get it back, he would get it back with maybe 10 seconds left, which would be much, much harder. If you'll even look at the Aaron Rodgers game the week before, he only needed 30 seconds and no timeouts to win the game. So I just think that's, if we were watching this on the other end, we would think that's a losing coach's mentality. That would be a Mike McCarthy kind of call. That would be a Jason Garrett call. That'd be a Todd Bowles call. To play afraid and not try and win the game there. I think you have a better chance of winning by going for it than not. And then the other reason why, though, I could see Bill not going for it is that he just doesn't trust the offensive line to make the protection, or the players to run the right routes right now to actually convert that down. So that's one reason I can see him seeing that. But just the way that the offense was playing in the second half, I would have given them trust in it. I think it would have been great for their momentum going forward if they did convert that. And if it didn't, then you gave it your all. They're going to lose either way. So I think it would have only been better off to go for it. Show them that you had some trust in them. But I can see him being afraid that the offensive line would have not blocked enough rushes, because that was happening the entire night. He was Mac Jones, we'll get to this later, was blitzed, I think 40 or 44% of the time, which is unsustainable for a pocket passing quarterback.
I think that was ultimately Bill's biggest thought was, if this goes to 4th down, I don't trust the offensive line to hold the blocking. Whereas this, I'm at least giving our team a shot to win.
Yeah.
I think one thing, I was actually surprised at how close the kick was. I think that kind of shows that maybe Bill's thinking might have been correct. I still don't agree with it, but considering how close the ball was, hitting off the upright, having the actual distance in the rain, in real time, it looked, once he kicked it, that it was good. It was a lot closer than I thought, but also I think, as we know, you have to just trust Bill's judgment. I still remember the Seattle Super Bowl when, after the first down run on first down, when it was ball on the 1 yard line, he wasn't calling the timeout when there was like a minute 20 left, and maybe just a minute left. And then if they got a touchdown, you would only need a field goal to tie it, but he wasn't calling timeout. And I remember I was screaming at the TV, "Why aren't you calling timeout?" But ultimately his judgment was correct, because he looked at the Seahawks sideline and knew something wasn't right, or at least that's what he claims. But so I trust his decision making. Sometimes it went, sometimes it backfires, but more likely than not, it's the right decision. Even though we don't agree with it at the time.
So going on to that, we kind of talked about the offense a little bit for this game. But any other thoughts kind of regarding the offense, what you liked, what you didn't like? I think obviously we're going to get into the offensive line, but that and anything else.
I think you have to start with Mac. He was just incredible. I know, again, to begin the game, it didn't give him as much as you like to see. They didn't open the offense as much as you would like, but just overall, his poise under all that pressure all night was just something that it's throughout the whole year, his poise under pressure, but it's just impressive to see for someone that's only making his fourth career start. And I think it's tough to argue that he outplayed Tom Brady with a less talented offense, which is pretty impressive. He made all the right throws. He was able to step up in the pocket when being pressured. So I thought you have to start with there. And even though the Patriots lost, it seemed like this was I don't know if closure is the right word, but seeing how Mac played knows against in the biggest spotlight, one of the most televised or most watched regular season games in NFL history, that he didn't crumble under pressure, which we weren't really sure how he was going to do. Yes, he played in the national championship last year. He played in the SEC, but playing against arguably the greatest football player of all time and actually playing better than him was very impressive. And then weak points, you just have to go with the offensive line as a whole, which I know you've discussed a little bit, but offensive line was just horrendous.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree with Mac. I think he made the majority of the reads. There was one, probably two things I would say throughout the whole game that were kind of negative plays. One was it was actually in the same play, but there was that throw across his body at the end of the game. And I think that was maybe another reason too, maybe why Bill might have held off from going for it on the fourth down, just because of risking that sort of kind of play there. But that was a horrendous decision. Just one of the basic things that you're taught as a quarterback from the very beginning is you try and never throw across your body. It's always going to end up, especially going into the middle of the field, it's usually going to end up as a bad play. It's either going to get tipped or it's going to get intercepted. Only bad things can happen there. So having him do that, I think was kind of more of like a rookie mistake. And then he actually ended up missing a wide open Hunter Henry in the end zone. But I don't fault him too much for that, because if you're looking at the camera angle in there, he is being chased down. I didn't think he was. I didn't think he was wide open. And if he actually tried to throw that, I don't think it would have been the right throw. The throw. But granted, the throw across the body wasn't the right throw. Yeah. And then again, but other than that, I think he was fantastic. He showed poise. He showed command of the offense. His no huddle offensive skill is really up there with really any of the top tier quarterbacks from what we've seen. He can really command the no huddle offense really well. If it was something that was sustainable to do throughout the whole game, I would love for them to see that, but it's just not. You can't do that every game. The offensive line wouldn't be able to handle it. So, but actually seeing that go through, he's very poised. He's able to command the offense. It's something we saw even in preseason too. It's something that kind of defined him over Cam then. But again, the offensive line, it's been kind of the same story this whole year, and it hasn't gotten any better. If anything, it's actually gotten worse. Isaiah Wynn was terrible. Owenu ended up getting benched in the game. Andrews looks like he's been lost the last two games. And both right tackles have been terrible. I don't know why Kajust isn't getting a chance at this point, unless he's just not showing anything in practice. But he's got to show something, because Haran and Durant haven't shown anything at right tackle. I do think it looked a little bit better when Karras was in. So I think maybe something that could possibly occur, and it's really tough to say. We'll get into this a little bit later on for our projections, but maybe having Karras start left guard and Owenu, if he's available, start right tackle, that may be something. But they just need to do if it still is this bad after this week, something's going to have to happen. They're either going to have to bring back Popovich and just force him to get the vaccine, somehow get Scarnecchia back in here, fire the offensive coordinator, or Bill's going to have to take over the offensive line coach. Yeah, offensive
Not
line coach, not the coordinator. But if I was Bill and Josh, I would go into that meeting room this week and say, you have your one last chance. If nothing shapes up, there's going to be major changes around here. Either position changes or coach changes. Something has to change because this is unacceptable. This isn't the way. This team is too talented on the offensive line for this to keep happening. And I don't know if it's just the second year Skarnecchia kind of thing, which happened before with Googs. Or maybe
we got into
Popovich
that
was
last episode too.
Yeah, but something has to change. Bill I don't think has ever fired a coach midseason, but this is getting to the point where it's ridiculous. Something has to change.
Yeah, and I know we've been saying this I think since week 1, where we didn't understand why they didn't move a one U to right with Trent Brown bringing out. We didn't understand why they didn't put Karras at left guard and move a one U to right tackle. It's something that we've been pretty much calling for all year. And even another thing with Wynn being as bad as he has this year too, when Trent Brown comes back, I still think the right decision might be put Wynn at left guard, move a one U to right tackle, and move Trent Brown back to left tackle where he was in 2018. Just a couple more things, kind of showing how bad the offensive line has been this year. Or starting with week 4 against the Bucs, Mac Jones' average time to throw was 2.3 seconds. He was still pressured on 37.8% of dropbacks, even though he was throwing it in 2.3 seconds. And then in week 1, he was pressured 35% of his dropbacks. In week 3, 35.7% of weak dropback, 35.7% of dropbacks, which this just is not sustainable. I know he's a rookie quarterback. He's shown a lot of poise, but if this keeps up all year, he's just going to get hurt.
Yeah,
we saw what happened to Joe Burrow last year without an offensive line, and he tore his ACL. We don't want that happening to Mac. I just had a couple more things to say on Mac, just showing how impressive he was. I'd say to start, he set the rookie record for most consecutive completions, and he also tied the Patriots record, which is owned by Brady, which Brady has played for the Patriots the last 20 years or so. And he was able to tie Brady's record of 19 straight completions. I thought on that stage is pretty remarkable. Granted, the Bucs secondary was beaten up. I know so he wasn't going up against the best cornerbacks, but under that pressure in that stage is pretty impressive. And then I'd say the thing that impressed me the most was after the Bucs drove down the field, got the touchdown to take the lead. I was a little concerned that the game might be over. I didn't think it was fully over, but it's just how are the Patriots offense? How is Mac going to respond to this? And what did they do? Mac went 7 for 7 for 77 yards and a touchdown to take the lead back from the Bucs. I thought that drive in that context in the fourth quarter was impressive. And just one more thing was, I know we talked about this pregame with the Bucs signing Richard Sherman on Wednesday or so, and he being the starting cornerback after not being on a team through minicamp, training camp, preseason, or the first start of the year. And in the first half, at least, I don't have the numbers in the second half, but first half, Mac was able to find Sherman and targeted him. And when he targeted Sherman, 7 for 7, 74 yards. So he was able to make the progression, see where defenders were. And that's something that Brady has done consistently his whole career. He did it on Sunday against the Patriots as well. So just something that's impressive to see from a young rookie quarterback.
Yep. I think if anything, they should have actually targeted Sherman more often just because he was so not ready for this game.
Yeah. And it's not to knock Sherman. It's just he was put in a tough situation.
Yeah, no, exactly. He hasn't been in football shape this whole year, and to put him in there starting, it wasn't even something he was expecting from this when he signed. So it just shows you how diminished the Bucs are in the secondary.
Yeah.
So going on to the defense, what were your thoughts on how they looked, how they played, and that sort of stuff?
I thought they looked great. Like I said, they did get lucky with Brady airmailing some throws for receivers that were open. They got lucky where some receivers dropped some pretty easy passes on that last drive. Antonio Brown on second and third down dropped. He should have gotten a touchdown on both of them. They were both perfect throws from Brady, and Patriots defense just lucked out. The third down one, Jones was in great coverage, but the ball did hit AB in the hands, and he should have caught that. But overall, I'd say the person I was most impressed with was just Jalen Mills, considering he was going up against Chris Godwin, who's one of the best receivers in football, and held him to 2 catches. Granted, it was 54 yards, but I wasn't expecting that at all. J.C. Jackson, 6 catches allowed on 12 targets. He allowed 75 yards, but he was going up against Mike Evans. So I think he did allow 6 catches, but I think he did a good job as well. Jonathan Jones did great. Matthew Judon was by far the best, at least best defender on the field, possibly the best player in the game on either side on Sunday. He was just impressive. And then the other thing was, I don't like arguing or saying how the refs were bad, but the Bucs offensive line was holding almost every play. And it wasn't just barely holding, it was like blatant holds, and they weren't being called. I think it kind of is a wash because of how when the Bucs had some wide open throws where Brady missed or receivers dropped. So I know it's not the same comparison, but it kind of washes out because of that, where Patriots got lucky on the missed throws, Bucs got lucky on the officials not calling the holding. But Matthew Judon was unbelievable. He was all over the field. Christian Barmore was excellent. He was getting pressure throughout the game. So those were just some things that my initial takeaway. I thought, like I said earlier, the way that they game plan for Brady was impressive. Interesting stat. I know it's not a perfect comparison, but just when Patrick Mahomes, who we can say is if not the top quarterbacks in the NFL the last 3 to 4 years, his Pro Football Focus passing grade against all other teams is 94.3. His passing grade versus the Patriots is 59. So his passing grade is 35 points lower against the Patriots than all other teams, just showing how Belichick is a master of game planning against elite quarterbacks. And that's what he did against Brady on Sunday. Brady wasn't horrendous, but he wasn't his usual self. And he was outplayed by Mac Jones.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think I tend to agree with pretty much everything you said. I think Jalen Mills really impressed me as well, just because we know kind of their perception of him being not a great cornerback, that he kind of gets beat a lot. But the fact that he was able to hold Godwin and kind of hold his own there. He did have some help over the top sometimes, but it wasn't every single time. I think he actually played really impressive. And then I think, again, Judon was by far the best defender on the team. He was getting pressure the entire time. He was being held a lot of the time, like you were saying, and was still getting to Brady. So that was just really impressive. And then Barmore, I think, continues to look better each and every week. It really shows what a kind of a steal that was in the draft, and kind of why he was graded originally as a first round pick. So he's actually really holding his own. And if you actually think about it, he's getting more action than I can really think of any defensive tackle they've ever drafted. So this could be
the only one you could possibly say is Richard Seymour. He was more defensive tackle and end.
Yeah, but he's more of an end though. So
he played in both nose tackle and end.
But he's, other than Seymour, he could be one of the best, but it all depends on how he continues with his career. But at least as a rookie, he's playing probably the best of any sort of defensive tackle they've drafted. And again, I think the game plan really worked really well to try and stifle Brady. They did get lucky a lot. There were a lot of either drop passes, and Brady missed a lot. He was high or wide on a lot, and that was probably just due to kind of the emotion probably got up to him. I don't think or some of the pressure too.
First half was also raining too.
Yeah,
where it wasn't as much in the second half.
But you didn't see the same sort of thing happen with Mac Jones. So it could be. It was probably a mix between everything: the rain, the kind of the emotion, and even the pressure too. So it's something that we've seen with Brady the last, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years, where if you get pressure on him, he does not step into the throws really anymore. He'll throw more off of his back foot. The ball goes high because of it. And you get some inaccurate throws, and that's what led to kind of his interception uptake the last couple of years. So it is something we've seen, and it makes sense because you're not going to want to get hit at that age as much. So you need to kind of protect your body. And another thing that was that I kind of noticed and then was kind of confirmed by some reporting by some others, notably Greg Bedard, that it looked like Belichick actually had more of an influence on this game than kind of the other games. And he took kind of more of an active play calling not exact play calling, but he was more involved in the defense this time, especially visually, than some of the other games. He was calling out different things. There was one time when he yelled at one of the players, hit, I think 84 or something like that. So
Yeah.
he was saying exactly what needed to be done. Whereas most of the time he steps back, he lets his son and then Mayo kind of make those calls, make those things. But Belichick was really audible and had kind of his mark on this. So even though I heard a lot of the broadcasts focused on his son Steve, it seemed like Bill had a big imprint on this, much more than he's had in the past. So I think that's something we've seen with Bill too, where he's really good at. He'll let something go for so long, and then if something needs to be kind of looked into, he'll step up and try and put his mark there. So that could be the case with the defense, or maybe just because it was Brady, and then we may see that again with the offensive line too.
Yep, I'd agree. So I guess next is just going with 3 up and 3 down from the game.
All right. I can go first, and then we could just kind of alternate our ups. They're probably going to be similar based on kind of how we're kind of looking towards so far. But I'll start. My first up would be Judon. I think he was probably one of the best players on the field. He was creating pressure the entire time. He was awesome. He was being held and was getting pressure. He really kind of had that kind of swagger that the Patriots have missed a little bit, and kind of brings that kind of Ravens nastiness to him. He was talking trash to Brady. He was talking trash to the Bucs sideline. I think that's something that really helped the defense. I think it's going to continue to help them throughout the year.
Yeah.
Yours?
My top?
Yeah.
I'd have to go with I thought you were going to say your top 3, but I'd say my top overall, I'd have to just go with Mac.
Yeah.
Just considering how good he was under the stage he was in that weather, which it wasn't terrible weather, but it was rain, which I don't know how, granted, I didn't watch all of Alabama's games last year, but so I don't know if they played in a lot of rain, but just considering how well he played on that pressure, on that stage, and one of the most watched nationally televised regular season games was just impressive. And considering how bad the offensive line was and how little time he had to throw.
Yeah, I think my number 2 would be kind of harboring that. Mac Jones is my number 2. He was awesome. He showed a lot of poise. He showed that he could command the offense, and he showed that he wasn't scared of this game. He didn't poop down his pants. He didn't go turtling in this game. When the light shined the brightest at the end, he was ready for it. He came back, scored that touchdown, and was coming down again to win the game again. And I think Bill should have put it in his hands. I get it's only his 4th game, but he I think could have done it. So Mac really impressed me again in this game. Your number 2?
My number 2 has to go with Matthew Judon, pretty much for everything you just said. He was the best player on the defense, and you could argue he was the best player on the field on either side of the ball for either team.
Yeah, no, agreed. So number 3, I'd go Jacoby Myers. He's been really showing up as probably their number 1 receiver right now. He's always dependable for Mac to go to, and also with those 2 trick plays, he's got quite an arm. So he's kind of turned into quite the tool for them. So I think he had a really good game and was really impactful in this game for them. Kind of without those plays, we might not have been in the position we were. So I think he really brought a lot to this game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd say my number 3 has to just go with Jalen Mills, just considering who he was matched up against. Godwin and someone. I know both of us haven't really been big on Mills going into the year. I think he's a good player for this organization since he plays a lot of different positions. But I thought maybe I wasn't sure who he'd be matched up against. I wasn't sure if he'd be matched up against anyone because of his speed and how fast they were going. I thought maybe they could use Juwan Williams instead, but he was impressive. How good he was holding Godwin to just being targeted 3 times and only 54 yards when being targeted by him. And then I'd say I also have 2 others that are one other one that I know it's only 3 up, but I just have to include Barmore. He was able to get pressure. He's just been great all year.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree with that. So going 3 down, my number 1 down would be Isaiah Wynn. He was awful in this game. He's been awful most of this whole year. He was getting rushed around the entire time. He does not look like the same player. So he just was not good in this game.
Yeah. I'd have to go with my number 1 down, the entire Patriots offensive line.
Yeah.
Just going all of them.
Yeah.
Right tackle, 4th week in a row, absolutely atrocious.
Mhm.
There was a time where I think it was a linebacker just pushed Durant. I think it was Durant pretty much all the way back into Mac, and Durant was pretty much hugging him and was still getting pushed back all the way into a sack.
Yeah.
Wynn was bad once again. He's just not who you'd be wanting your left tackle,
Mhm.
at least through the first 4 weeks. Wenyu, who's probably you can argue was their best offensive line player last year and the first 3 games this year, but he just had a very off night. 2 holding calls. He had 2 hits to Mac as well, or 2 people that got by him and hit Mac.
Mhm.
And I believe on the broadcast I heard that he was in the medical tent at one point. I don't know if they were just mistaken and he was actually benched.
Mhm.
But there might have been like a slight injury that initially led to it, but he was also benched for Karras. I thought Karras played okay when he was in.
Mhm.
And then Andrews, who I know both of us are big fans of, he just looked completely lost on
Mhm.
Sunday. So I'd say just number 1 is just the whole offensive line. They were just all bad. I couldn't pick one to go
Yep.
with. So I just went with all of them.
Yep. No, I was thinking of that too, because my number 2 down was the right tackle position. Durant and Haran, or Harantis. I'm trying to think of a way
Horrendous.
to. No, I know horrendous, but I'm trying to make the 2 of their names combined. They're terrible. They something needs to give in that position. They haven't looked good the entire time either. So I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know if it's just their ability, but they were not good in this game again. And I think it was actually a safety or a corner or something that pushed Durant back. Because I think it was someone that was pretty small.
That was last week.
Oh, it was last week. So it happens every
Yeah.
week. So it's not something that
Yeah.
we're not used to seeing. So again, yeah, I would say the right tackle position. And you could kind of put me up there. The entire offensive line, other than Shaq Mason, was horrible.
Yep.
And Andrews is looking lost. So who would your second down be?
My second down would be Aguilar, just because he had in the first half some key drops where right in his hands dropped, including the interception by Mac. It was a tough catch, but it was also something that he should have had, being the number 1 paid wide receiver on the team.
Yep.
And he had a good first game against Miami, and it just seemed like he's just fallen off a cliff since then. Just hasn't been the same. So hopefully that's something that can be corrected.
Yeah.
But it seems like his stone hands from his days in Philadelphia have come back to him.
Yeah.
Which is concerning.
Yeah, no, I agree too about that interception. That's another that was a tough catch, but something you have to make. You can't let that happen. So, and then I would say my number 3 down would be JJ Taylor. You finally get the chance to have the ball, you can't fumble it. Yeah, and that was one of the plays that cost them the game. If they had at least 3 points there, and that would have been a game changer there. So between him and Slater, the 2 different plays that kind of ruined the game for them. But Taylor, you have to hold on to the ball. You're with White down, you're finally getting your chance to kind of shine, and you can't have fumbles. Now he's going to be probably witness protection with Stevenson. We're not going to see the 2 of them for another 3 or 4 weeks, and they'll probably sign some journeyman, a special team running back instead because of this. So I think JJ Taylor would be number 3.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. JJ is actually my number 3 as well. Just that situation, you can't fumble. He's someone that him along with how well him and Stevenson were in the preseason led to them trading away Sony Michel, who a couple of years ago I think he ran for 1,000 or was close to 1,000. He was a key contributor in the 2018 playoffs, why you won the Super Bowl, especially in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Granted, Sony Michel, at least from what I've seen, hasn't looked great with the Rams. The game I went to when the Rams were playing the Bucs, he just looks slow.
Yeah.
And then I remember the people sitting behind me were yelling, "Why do you keep giving the ball? He just looks like he's like Todd Gurley 3.0, just worse." Like Todd Gurley after his injuries, but pretty much he doesn't look the same. But I mean, considering the production you've gotten out of everyone but Harris this year, maybe that was a mistake. Maybe he could have at least given you something.
Yep. No,
But
agreed. So I think we kind of talked about a lot of the high points of the game. Any other things that you'd like to add?
Nothing really. It's just
Mhm.
the secondary and defense as a whole pretty much looked
Mhm.
great. Is it something that they were just up for the task against a superior, arguably the best offense in football? Are they going to take the same approach week in, week out? Or is it something that it was just this one game where, you know, how when some teams play the Patriots, it's their Super Bowl and then the next week they get crushed?
Mhm.
Is that going to happen with this, where defense was looking at it as their Super Bowl, essentially playing the best offense in football, playing against Tom Brady, and they might not be as good going forward, putting in
Yep.
that amount of focus each week? Just
Yep.
something to consider going forward. With Bill as the coach, I don't think that's the case, but it's just something that this was by far their best game. And is this something sustainable? If it's sustainable, they have a shot this year, but
Yeah.
of at least making possibly a playoff run or a deep playoff run. But if it's just this one game and then they revert back to just not being consistent, then it might be a tough season.
Yep. No, agreed. And I think just going into kind of those areas of concern, we've really talked about it. It's basically the offensive line
Yeah.
and the defense. Is the defense going to stay going to continue to improve? And then the offensive line, something has to give. And I think we just keep beating a bush with this, but something has to change in there.
Yep, I agree. So I guess next thing to move on to is some breaking news that I woke up to this morning that you were probably already up, but
Yep.
considering I'm on the West Coast, what are your thoughts on I guess now the trade of Stephon Gilmore to the Panthers?
Yeah, so I think it's something. It really shocked me at the beginning to see this morning about, because when I woke up to it, it was a release, and I was thinking you can't get anything for him, not even like a 6th-round
Yeah.
pick or something. But it ended up turning out to be a 6th-round pick to the Panthers. So kind of the news out there that broke afterwards was that the Patriots were actually shopping Gilmore around on Monday to probably 4 or 5 teams that they
It was
knew
actually
closely.
yesterday.
Oh, yesterday?
They're
All right.
shopping. Yeah, Breer initially said Monday, but he meant Tuesday. He
Okay.
later corrected the tweet.
Okay. Yeah. So yesterday, to about 4 or 5 teams that they were close with, that they thought that they could trust, that the news won't leak out, that they were looking to try and trade him. They couldn't come to agreement with those teams. So in order to try and make more news of it, to try and get someone to kind of bite on it, they leaked out that they were going to be releasing him. That way someone would try and jump on him, so that way he wouldn't get to like a different team. So knowing that, and knowing that kind of the info that's been kind of coming out again, that Gilmore wanted a pay increase still for this year with the Patriots in order to play. I think it's just something I can see why the Patriots said no. So right now he was set to be paid his whole salary for this year with only playing basically half the season. Whereas if he had sat out and held out and got like that pay increase, the 15 million or so, he would have only seen half that, because it would have to be prorated for the amount of games he missed. So he'd only be making $7.5, $8 million this year. So I can see why the Patriots wouldn't want to do that, where you're basically getting kind of the same thing. You're getting the same money for playing the same amount of games. You had a major quad injury last year. We don't know that you're healthy. We haven't seen you play. I can see if maybe they could said to him, we want you to play a game or two. If you are healthy, we'll be glad to pay you or extend you for another year. If not, we're not paying you. But I can see where Gilmore comes. He doesn't want to kind of lose his leverage there. But I can definitely see why it's been a long time with Gilmore. They really kind of screwed the pooch where they probably should have traded him last trade deadline to get something more for him before the injury happened, knowing that they had only a year and a half of him left, and last season was kind of a lost cause. But I can definitely see what happened. I'm not terribly upset over it. I'm glad they got at least something for him. And I just wouldn't give him any money extra until he's healthy. He's 31 years old. Aging corners, we know, age very fast. Look at Revis. They all fall off of a cliff. You even look at Julio Jones. You have an injury that starts to linger and it keeps going. And the legs on corners and receivers, once they start going, they're not going to improve. So I can definitely see why it happened. I'm not terribly upset over it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree too. When I woke up and saw that, I was like, what the heck? They only released him. They kind of trade him for something.
Mm-hmm.
After finding out a little bit more how, like you said, he's 31 years old, coming off a major injury where he hasn't been able to play this year,
Mm-hmm.
had surgery, and he still wants to be paid as a top cornerback, $15 million a year. Just
Mm-hmm.
if that's something, I don't think the Patriots should pay him. You don't know how healthy he is, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
and he had sort of a down year last year, at least
Yep.
from his defensive player of the year. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't the top corner back in the NFL last year.
Yeah.
Considering he's now older, coming off this injury, he's at least not worth the money. Patriots are up against the cap. I think Schefter said this morning they only had $54,000 in cap space before the decision.
Mm-hmm.
By trading him or cutting him, you pretty much get almost $6 million in cap space,
Mm-hmm.
which is big for the Patriots. It allows them to make moves like they did signing Jamie Collins today, other additions that they need to make during the year, people that are elevated from the practice squad to the 53-man roster, things like that. So they needed more cap space. But
yeah,
I'm at least glad that they traded him. So they got something in return. It's only a 6th-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
And if he plays well with Carolina, they're going to get possibly a 5th-round pick back. So it makes sense why Carolina traded for him. They're essentially getting
Mm-hmm.
a slightly increase in draft pick, and they get a cornerback with J.C. Horn being hurt.
Yeah.
But also, I like that by trading him, you're choosing the destination of where he's going. It's not like you cut him and then he goes to the Chiefs, or he goes to someone that might hurt you this year
Mm-hmm.
in the playoffs. I don't like that he's going to someone that they're facing this year, since the Patriots are facing the Panthers in week 9 or
Mm-hmm.
week 8 or 9. I think week 9. So that might not be great, but also it might show that Bill doesn't think he's the same player anymore. Just like when he traded Bledsoe in division, because
Yeah.
he didn't think he was someone that could hurt him. So he might think the same thing. I'm at least picking the destination, but I also know that he's not going to hurt us.
Yeah. And then I think it's something too where this happened right after the Bucs game instead of right beforehand. So knowing that the Bucs were short on corners, to wait kind of till after then to try and address this.
And I think he also didn't want to cause, and he's well liked in the locker room, at least from what we've heard. So don't want to cause that distraction leading up into arguably the biggest game of the year.
Yeah.
Of the Bucs.
No, agreed. And then I think just one other thing with it. I think one thing that helped kind of this decision for him too was knowing how they played against the Bucs, where they may be able to get a round without having him, and they may start keeping improving without him.
Yep, I agree.
Yep. So we kind of get a little bit to the news around the league. First one I'd like to get to would be just Jimmy Garoppolo. What do you think of the whole situation? He goes out of the game after the second half. He says, I'm gonna get an MRI. Hopefully it's only 2 or 3 weeks I'll be out for. Turns out he's got a contusion of his calf, which is just a bruise on his calf. And he says that he's going to try and battle through to play this week. He's not practicing. What do you think of the Jimmy Garoppolo situation?
He's just a wuss.
Yeah.
I've been saying this dating back to when he was with the Patriots, where he started week 1, or when Brady was suspended, he started the first 2 games, and then he got hurt against Dolphins. He was playing great, on pace for over 400 yards that game, got hurt and missed the next 2 games. They had to go with Jacoby Brissett week 3, and then Jacoby Brissett got hurt in week 3, and then he still had to play week 4, essentially not able to throw, but still man through it, Jacoby Brissett, and then played, whereas Jimmy could have given them a better option.
Yeah.
So, and then we found out afterwards that that's an injury that Brady has had numerous times in his career and played through it without any issue. That's where I first started getting he doesn't have the stones. And then when he went to 49ers, these injuries kept popping up again and again. ACL tear is something you can't really control. But all the other injuries he's had, he just didn't play through. And it just shows like he doesn't have the stones to be your franchise quarterback. I understand why the 49ers made the trade up to get quarterback at number 3. I don't know. I don't agree with the decision for Trey Lance. I've always been a big Mac Jones guy, but I also don't think he would have had to trade all the way up to 3 to get Mac Jones. but I understand why they didn't think Jimmy is the face of the franchise. And that's actually part of the reason why in the offseason, I know you were big on Patriots need to get Jimmy. Patriots need to get Jimmy. I'm just not a big Jimmy guy. You can't trust him to be healthy all year. If you had him as your quarterback this year, does he get through week 1 against Miami where he's getting pressure 35% of the dropbacks? Are we playing with Brian Hoyer the next 5 games?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just something that's plagued him his whole career, and he just shows that I don't know if he has the stones to be a franchise quarterback.
Yep. No, I completely agree. And, I was always big on the Jimmy thing. The original thing, there were reports after that, the subluxation of his arm, where I think Bedard and some of the other reporters, when they were asking some just Patriot insiders, what do you think of Jimmy? And the number one thing is he's just not as tough as you'd like him to be. And the fact that Jacoby Brissett had to go out there with a torn ligament in his thumb where he can't even grip the ball to throw it, and you have a sore shoulder and you can't try and gut it out. I think that's something that just really made the Patriots upset then. And I can, knowing this now, makes me kind of look back to that and say, well, what are you doing? And the ACL, you can't play him for. That's a freak injury. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
Even an ankle sprain, a high ankle sprain, maybe. I don't know enough about them, but it seems like they're big issues. But as a quarterback, you should be able to play. But for this, where you're fighting for your NFL career here, you're trying to keep your job. You're trying to show for. Obviously, you're not going to be a starting quarterback for the 49ers next year. You're going to be looking for a job somewhere else because they have Trey Lance. They didn't trade up 3 first-round picks, so that way you're starting next year. So you're obviously going to need to start somewhere else. So you need to showcase everyone this year that you have it. You're the number one quarterback, that you have what it takes to lead a team to the Super Bowl. And you go out with a bruise on your calf and say, oh, I don't even know if I could play next game. Like, that's completely unacceptable. That's completely ridiculous. I'm completely done with this guy. I was a Jimmy lover, and I don't want to hear it anymore because it's like the girl who cried wolf, or boy who cried wolf. It's so many times you just don't have it. And if you don't have what it takes to play through and gut through, you look at Mac Jones, he's obviously got a knee issue going on. His knee gets stuck sometimes when he slides or anything like that. There's obviously something going on with him. He's getting hit 35-40% of the time. He's getting murdered back there, and he's still sticking in there. He's got way more stones than Jimmy has, and he's a rookie. So I think that really all tells you what you need to think about Jimmy. I just wouldn't give that guy any money. I wouldn't want him as my starting quarterback unless you had someone that was a dependable backup behind him where you could kind of risk it and hope he goes an injury-free season like he did with the 49ers that one year. So if you have someone that's dependable, maybe then I would do it. But if you have that dependable quarterback, what's the reason? So
and I thought it was interesting. I know Sunday I was texting you saying, bold prediction, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is the Steelers starting quarterback on week 1 just because Ben doesn't look the same. I think this is last year. But then after that I said, as long as he's healthy, which is not a guarantee. And then literally 10-15 minutes later he leaves the 49ers game with a calf injury. So
no, agreed. So moving on, the Urban Meyer situation, I think, would just be something remiss if we didn't talk about. So what do you kind of think about that whole situation? How it unfolded? What do you think is going to be kind of going on for the rest of the season with that Jacksonville team?
I thought it was nuts. I thought it was something like when I initially just saw the news, I thought it was like a bar in Jacksonville after they got back or something, but he didn't take the flight home after a game. The only time I've ever heard of a coach not taking the flight back home after a game was Parcells not taking the team flight home after the Patriots lost the Super Bowl because he already took the Jets job and pretty much was done with Kraft. So it's kind of like an FU to Kraft, interesting side note, Bill Belichick took the flight home and actually went up to every player and thanked them for their effort that year, which kind of showed who Bill Belichick is and why he's the coach he is. But beside the point, I've just never heard of that. And someone made an interesting comment saying, say you take Urban Meyer's name out and you replace it with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence after the game says that he's heartbroken after the loss. And then after that, you see, number one, Trevor Lawrence doesn't take the flight back with the rest of the team. Then you see number 2, Trevor Lawrence, seen partying at a bar with a woman that's not his wife or girlfriend after the loss. It's just, granted, the whole woman dancing on him, everything, that's a whole nother story. I think the worst part is him just pretty much not taking the flight home with the team. Pretty much kind of shows the team that he doesn't care.
Yep. No, I completely agree. I think the worst part of it is not even the whole women incident. I think it's the fact that you skipped the team plane to go at your bar that you own. And like, if you wanted to go there, take the team plane back. You have enough money, charter a plane back and go to the bar for that weekend, because you have a few days off. That's fine. What you do on your own time, it's not really something that's that I'm gonna really get into that much. But it also puts kind of a cloud over the organization. It's not something that, when you're out, people have phones, people are able to take videos, people able to take pictures. So you have to kind of hold yourself in that kind of pristine accountability, and knowing kind of the decisions that you're making reflect not only upon you, but the organization as well. So I get some of this stuff happens in like combine, that sort of stuff people have said, and it's not great, but you also have to kind of know your surrounding, know what's going to be happening. This isn't college anymore. This isn't something you can get away with. This is the National Football League, and it's going to be a bigger deal with that. And I don't think he's going to last the whole season. If he does, he's not making it through his whole contract, because he's been a disaster wherever he goes. He wins usually in college, but that's because you can recruit like hell and get as many good players as you want. But the second anything bad happens, he's gone. So he's not staying the 6 years. And I realistically think that he's probably trying to get himself fired so he can get the USC job, and trying to abandon the ship of 0-4 right now. That wouldn't shock me at all. But I also don't know what kind of athletic director would want to hire this man right now. There's a stat, I think 85% of athletic directors surveyed said they would not interview him or hire him at all based on what he's done in the last few years. So that's just something.
I think the only ones that really would take a shot is a program that's in bad shape that you need to fix, like Vanderbilt, for instance. They're atrocious for an SEC team, but maybe if we get Urban Meyer, maybe that'll turn things around. But other than that, I don't see, if he was trying to get fired to take the USC job, I don't see how USC gives him the job. Even though he brought national championships to Florida and to Ohio State, I don't see any major programs in a good position giving him a job.
Yeah. And then speaking of giving jobs, this is kind of just one kind of extra question that I had for you. Heard on the Felger Maz show this week. After what, especially because you watched the TV copy, and I only saw this afterwards. After watching Steve Belichick on the sideline, if you were an NFL owner, would you hire that man?
That is a great question. So my thought, dating back to when Steve became, I think, safety coach or cornerback coach, I was out of the camp of Josh McDaniels being the coach when Bill leaves. And I thought he's going to keep coaching until he gets the record and then make sure that the job goes to Steve. I think Steve's going to be the next Patriots head coach. I said that 4 or 5 years ago. I still think that now. Yes, he looked nuts. He looked like, but I kind of like it how he was. It showed how into the game he was, and how. So granted, I don't think you can always go by cues like that. Granted, for Adam Gase kind of did during his press conference with the Jets. He looked insane. And that was kind of the first cue that it was over before it started. But I mean, this is the first time we've seen anything from Steve like that. And granted, I know you're not a big fan of him. You've been up and down on him since he's been calling the defensive plays, but I think he still has the Belichick mind. He has insight. And when Bill leaves, I think Bill will still consult and give him advice leading up to it. So I still think Steve's the next coach of the Patriots. I've said it for 5 years. I'm sticking to it until I'm proven wrong.
Oh, I don't think he would be. If any of the Belichick sons would, I think it'd actually be Brian. Supposedly he's actually more of the brains. He's got more of like the football mind of the two of them. But I don't think really either of them would be the coach. I think they'd try and have kind of a clean break from the Belichick tree. And I don't think they might want to kind of follow in their father's footsteps either here. But I do think a coach would not coach, an owner would hire him as a head coach.
Yeah.
Just because he's got that bloodline. So someone would take the chance on him. I think there would be some that may be detracted now after watching that. Obviously, you don't want another gay situation in your hands, but I don't think he did himself any favors. But I still think that there is going to be at least a couple owners that would want to take the flyer on him just by he's the
I can
Belichick
see Jim
bloodline.
Merritt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So going on next, just based on them being 1-3, is there a path forward for them to make the playoffs? What do you think their chances would be now?
I think there is, but they haven't done themselves any favors by losing. The Miami game was just a killer.
Mm-hmm.
Losing it to a team that doesn't look as that good anymore. Mixed with you had the ball. If it wasn't for Damian Harris' fumble, you win that game. So that was definitely a killer. And then this game, they completely outplayed the Bucs, but they had the two turnovers, which killed them in the end. So they are 1-3. I think just going record-wise, they have to go 11-6, maybe 10-7 gets them in the playoffs. Even 10-7 is kind of a stretch considering the rest of the AFC. How last year you had to go 11-5 to make the playoffs, and if Miami won that last game of the year, you would have had a team not making the playoffs going 11-5. So essentially, they have to go 10-3, maybe 9-4, maybe even 11-2 to make the playoffs down the stretch. I think they definitely have a shot, but it's going to be tough. Some teams that are potential wildcard teams right now, which I don't think are going to win the division, but you have the Baltimore Ravens. They're 3-1. You have the Los Angeles Chargers, 3-1. Chargers are good. Ravens, I still don't believe in Lamar Jackson. I think he's extremely overrated. I think they might fall down the stretch, but right now they're playing well. Vegas Raiders, they're 3-1. I still don't buy into them. I don't buy into Derek Carr, but they're playing well. Bengals are 3-1. They're playing well. Joe Burrow's healthy. He's doing well. Granted, they've had some wins against teams that aren't great, but same with the Ravens and Raiders. But our Raiders actually had some wins against some good teams, but Chargers are probably the one team that will probably make the playoffs as a wild card team at least. And then it's just, can the Patriots get to 11-5 or 11-6? Mm-hmm. And I think they can. I think the next 6 games are going to be very telling. Next 6 games, they're playing 4 probable playoff teams, and Cowboys, who are 3-1, Chargers are 3-1, Panthers are 3-1, and the Browns are 3-1. Then mix in there, we have the Texans coming up this upcoming weekend, then Jets a couple weeks later. I think at a minimum over this 6-game stretch, you have to go at least 4-2 or better, and that's against 4 playoff teams. So you can only afford, of those 4 playoff games, you can afford maximum 2 losses. Cowboys, I know you're not big. I know you're not big on them. I think they have the talent. It's just the organization structure with Jerry Jones, and I don't buy into Mike McCarthy, but they have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. Mm-hmm. Chargers, they completely shut down the Chargers last year, but you and me are both big on Justin Herbert, and they have the talent as well. And then it's just the Panthers and Browns. So next 6 weeks are telling. If they're able to go 4-2, 5-1, then I think they have a good shot of making the playoffs. If they go 3-3 or worse, then they're looks like another year without them making the playoffs.
Yep. No, I agree.
And also one more point. Mm-hmm. Sorry to cut off, but they have to go 9-3 or 10-3 or 9-4, and they're playing in their upcoming games at least 7 games against playoff teams, 7 to 8 playoff teams. So you have to go at least 500 against those teams and win all the games against the teams you should.
Yep. Yeah, this is going to be a hard stretch. This is why they really kind of screwed the pooch on the beginning. That this is supposed to be the easy part of their schedule, and they're working out 1-3. So, but I do think it's possible if they keep kind of this momentum up, and especially having the Texans be a nice little easy landing spot, get them going, and kind of continue the momentum of last week. They realistically are going to need probably 11 wins this season. So it is possible. It's just that they got little margin of error, so they can't lose to any of the easy teams coming up, and they have to play well against the other team. So I do think it's possible. I think that this Bucs game could kind of be kind of that kind of juggernaut like the Rams game was back in 2001, where you didn't win the game, but it kind of showed you what kind of team you had and that you can win against kind of a team like this, a Super Bowl team. So it's kind of the same sort of situation. The Rams won the Super Bowl the year prior, and they went toe to toe with them. 2 years prior. They were in the Super Bowl the year before, right?
No, the year before was Ravens versus Giants, but they were still good the year before.
Yeah, but they're facing a Super Bowl caliber team. So,
and then that year the Patriots also went 1-3.
Yeah,
just interesting side note.
Yeah, so it's got a lot of similarities. A lot of similarities with Mac and Brady, kind of their stats and everything. So I think they have the exact same quarterback rating, which also is kind of underinflated for Mac based on this offensive line and the drops and interceptions caused by the offensive line and the drops.
Yeah.
So I think actually Max is actually a little underinflated. He'd probably be in the 100 somewhere.
And so I think also part of that was Brady, I don't think threw an interception his first 6 games as a rookie, and Mac already has 4, which kind of shows half of them weren't his fault. And then the other one of them was like late in the game. So out of his 4 interceptions, it kind of shows his rating is still as high as it is kind of just another showing how well Mac has been this year.
Yeah, agreed. So going on next would just be kind of a little Texans preview. What do you think the keys to the game? Any sort of important matchups that we're going to look at?
I guess I'm kind of laughing a little bit because number one key to the game is Mac Jones going to get out of the game alive and uninjured. So some of the big news over the past 48 hours outside of the Stephon Gilmore injury, or not injury, Stephon Gilmore trade, is we found out yesterday Isaiah Wynn and Onwenu are both on the COVID list. So if they're vaccinated, there's a potential they might be able to come back if they should produce 2 negative tests 24 hours apart. If they're not vaccinated, then they're definitely out for Sunday. So there's a decent chance that both when you're starting left tackle, you're starting left guard, so the quarterback's blind side on the offensive line, which has been the weakest point of the team, might be out on Sunday. Then Trent Brown's still dealing with an injury. He was out of practice today. Then surprisingly, Shaq Mason was also absent from practice today with Trent Brown was an ankle injury. Sorry, I don't know if I said that. Shaq Mason was absent with an abdominal injury. If Trent Brown isn't able to play on Sunday, we're worried that Justin Herron or Durant or both are going to play, which they've been your worst players this year. If you also aren't with Shaq Mason, there's potential the only starter on the offensive line will be David Andrews. And who the hell knows who else is going to be playing. Karras might be playing guard if Onwenu's out. Karras has looked good this year. He's always been a dependable guy. But I have no idea. We're going to have Justin Herron at left tackle and Durant at right tackle. Who's going to play right guard? I think that could be. That's why I thought this was going to be an easy win as long as they're able to focus. But I'm very concerned just for the offense if half these players, let alone all 4 of these offensive line players, aren't able to start. So that's, I guess, where I have to start and finish because I have no idea what's going to happen if 2 to 4 of these offensive line guys are out.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big thing. I think luckily, I think the majority of the Patriots are vaccinated. So there's a good shot that both of them are. And I would think based on today being, if it was yesterday, they were testing positive, there's a decent shot they may test negative, towards the end of the week. But there's also no way of knowing.
Test two tests 24 hours apart, which is the tricky part. So they'd have to test negative first on Friday, I believe.
Yeah. And then just Trent Brown needs to get healthy. I don't know what's keeping him again, but he really needs to be back. And then we don't really know what the deal is with Shaq Mason. But at least with Ted Karras, at least he can kind of take one of those roles, but both can't be out is the thing. And then we kind of really need Trent Brown back. So if Trent Brown's back and one of the either Wynn or Onwenu or Mason is available, then you can kind of mix and match. You could have Wynn shift the guard, you could have Wynn shift the tackle or what have you, and kind of just mix around. But I think that's the biggest thing that we have to kind of worry about, where this should have been an easy game and they still should win this game just by how bad the Texans are. And they're probably trying to get the number 1 pick this year and try and sort things out. And their offensive line is also garbage. So David Mills doesn't have that much time to throw either. So It just should be. Hopefully they'll be able to pull this out. I still think they will, but I think it'd just be a lot tougher than it initially was going to be.
Yeah, definitely. I think some factors in the game is just we've seen this a lot over the years is the familiarity of the Texans going to be a disadvantage for the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
Just they have a lot of players and just front office staff that have been with the Patriots. Danny Amendola, Terrence Brooks, Rex Burkhead, Marcus Cannon, Brandon Cooks, Derek Rivers, Quisenberry, Jack Easterby, Nick Casario. Is that all that familiarity going to be a disadvantage for the Patriots? I don't think so, considering I don't think the Texans are very talented, but the Texans have also given you trouble the last few years. I believe Patriots lost the last two times to them. 2019, they got blown out, or not blown out, but they didn't play well. And then last year they lost as well. It was close in the score, but it wasn't really close in play on the field.
Yeah.
So those are some things to consider. And then just David Mills. I know you're big on him coming out of college. You thought he was a potential target for the Patriots if they didn't get a quarterback round one. He does have good potential, but he was pretty horrendous against Buffalo. Part of it was their offensive line, but through the first 3 quarters, he had 3 completions and he had 2 interceptions thrown. He finished the day 11 for 21, 87 yards, 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 3 sacks. So it depends. He's a rookie quarterback. Hopefully the Patriots defense, considering how well they played last week and how they played against Zach Wilson, hopefully they can get some turnovers. And even if the offensive line is struggling, just having the ball more often, not allowing the Texans to score. So even if you win in a low scoring game, it at least gives you an opportunity to win.
Yeah, I think that's a big key of the game. Getting some turnovers, getting some maybe defensive scores, special team scores. And just holding the ball, and that way the Texans aren't able to get in there. And the way that Belichick is against rookie quarterbacks is, I think we've talked about that record before with Zach Wilson. It's just really well. So they should be able to do some stuff, confuse them, get them kind of seeing ghosts, kind of like Donald saw before. So just one last thing going about kind of that game. The Barstool Sportsbook rates it, the Patriots are favored at -8.5. So I would actually be taking them with that. I would go with Patriots 24-10. And the over the game they have is 39.5. So that would obviously be the under. So I'd take the under of that. I don't think it's going to be a high scoring game for the Patriots based off of the line issues that we're seeing. So what would your thoughts be on there?
Yeah, it's kind of tough for me to make a prediction. If I'd say I'll go on both extreme sides of the spectrum. If the whole offensive line is healthy, and even if just one of the offensive line players is gone and you have 4 of the 5 starters, I say the Patriots should win easy, maybe 28 or 30. I'd say probably 31 to maybe 10. Maybe they get a lucky touchdown in garbage time. If you're without 3 or 4 of those starters, I think it's going to be tough. I think they still win, maybe 17-10, 17-6, something like that. So I'm definitely going with the under. Possibly if everyone's healthy, you might go with the over, but I think it's right around that borderline, 39.5 if everyone's healthy. Might be safe to go with the under, just the uncertainty of what the offensive line is going with. And then also the Texans offense, I don't think we covered it a little bit. I don't think their offense is that talented to begin with. They have a lot of running backs that are big names, Ingram, Johnson, Burkhead, Lindsey, but it seems like all of them are kind of past their prime, and I don't think any of them really have good stats this year. And they do have Brandon Cooks at receiver, who through the first 4 weeks is one of the most productive wide receivers in football. But throughout his career, he's always put up stat numbers, but has never been like an elite Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber player, which we were able to see that firsthand when he was with the Patriots. The 1 year he was here, he just didn't make those plays. It just seemed like maybe a big gain here and there, but it wasn't in a key situation. And then even in the Super Bowl when he was with the Rams, he just wasn't able to make those plays. He had that key drop. And he should have, I think there's a play where there's an interception where he should have gotten it as well. He just kind of gave up on the ball. But I think even though he's talented, I think the Patriots know how to defend him and take him out of the game. So The Texans offense doesn't worry me at all. It's just if the Patriots offense isn't able to get anything going because of their offensive line, then it's kind of going to be a low scoring game, and a turnover or something like that can shift the way the game goes.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think one other thing just to kind of point out too with the Texans that you did mention that they've had trouble. They also had Deshaun Watson playing for him before. They don't have Watson right now. And I don't remember last year if O'Brien was still the coach at that time.
I believe he was.
I
But
think
I'm
he
not positive.
was. So he still had familiarity with the Belichick scheme, whereas this is a new coaching scheme. Casario is the GM, but he also doesn't really have sort of play calling or kind of scheming going involved. So that's just another thing to kind of consider there.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Yep. All right.
And then I think Romeo Crennel is still in the Texans staff. I don't know if he's actually a defensive coordinator, but I think he's still at least on staff there. So there's still a little familiarity. But
yeah. If it is, he's probably getting up there.
It's been almost 20 years since he was with the Patriots, but he knows Belichick.
Yeah. No, agreed. I think we could wrap it up here. Thank you again, everyone, for listening. Again, you could follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod. My name's Kevin, my co-host Eric. Thank you very much, and hope you enjoy this, and see you next time.